Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating. While it wasn't explicitly said by people or Okabe himself, there are a lot of hints pointing to Okabe absolutely hating the fact that he lost to a nobody like Katsuragi Ace. Now, the reason why I believe that is the case is because of the fact that Okabe is Rudolph's #1 fan. Teo wishes she had the same amount of love that Okabe has. One of the most famous, or rather infamous, books of Japanese horse racing was Yukio Okabe's book, which was called Rudolph's Back. Yes, that's what it's called, I'm not joking. And this book is basically a sort of diary for Okabe and his thoughts on Rudolph, which, well, yeah, you know what? Let me just read an excerpt to you and you'll understand. When sitting astride a horse, the rider directly feels the horse through the inner thighs, knees, calves, and ankles. Through the relatively thick fabric of riding breeches, the horse's body of 37 degrees Celsius is also transmitted. In Rudolph's case, these sensations were the same as those of the 2 to 3-year-old horses that I rode every year. Yet, something was different. The word aura would be the most accurate way to describe it. This aura felt about half a year more mature compared to the other horses I rode each year. Rudolph-kun, yo, I call out to him from his back. It's a race, but let's take it easy. I'm not Chris McCarran, but take it easy, you know? With your smarts, you probably understand this much English. Yeah, just take it easy. That's it. That's it. That's the spirit. Skinship is done with the palm. With my right hand, sometimes my left, I gently stroke Rudolph's neck from his waist to his hindquarters. The sole purpose of this touching is to calm the horse's spirit. If necessary, I repeat it as many times as needed. I don't stop until a deep sense of calm appears in Rudolph's heart. Rudolph has likely received exceptional care in Japan, resulting in the remarkable beauty of his current coat. Rudolph's skin is remarkably fine-textured, and he sweats a lot. A horse with good skin always sweats consistently. It's the same even in winter. On the other hand, that sweat dries quickly. Such good sweat doesn't soak through the fabric of our breeches into the legs of us riders. I stroked Rudolph's body. His surface felt as gentle as touching the finest velvet. Until I met Rudolph, I never once thought a thoroughbred could be such a creature. I doubted my own senses, wondering if such a dreamlike thing could be real. But it was actually happening right before my eyes. My favorite type of horse, you ask? A horse with a small face and sensitive ears. Eyes that are large, clear, and bright. I don't like horses that roll their eyes wildly, scanning their surroundings. As for coat color, I prefer bay. Rudolph's face is neither too large nor too small, perfectly balanced with his entire body. It also looks refined and sharp. That's why, when I first met Rudolph, even before I sat astride him, I thought to myself, this one's a runner. I'll write about the sensitivity of his ears later. As for the expression in his eyes and the color of his coat, those are just my personal preferences. I love a bay like Rudolph. First of all, I'm really sorry if you felt uncomfortable listening to me read this passage. Second of all, do you see what I mean by Okabe really liking Rudolph? Like, to a kind of unhealthy degree. Just the words and the manners that was used to just talk about his thoughts on Rudolph are so sensual to the point that many have taken to calling this book softcore, this word. I'm not taking my chances. As for the ace hate, well, here's where Okabe talks about his frustrations on the horse. That defeat wasn't due to Rudolph's lack of ability. It was my own shortcomings as a jockey. Yukio Okabe. I wanted to prove that to the fans by decisively avenging the loss against Katsuragi. Perfectly defeating Katsuragi Ace and Mr. CB was my way of repaying Rudolph, who taught me how to handle the reins and gave me the glory of being a Triple Crown jockey. Rudolph and I, we had the ultimate relationship of mutual growth, or so I believe. What I gave him might be far less than what he gave me. Rudolph's unstoppable charge after turning 3 wasn't, unfortunately, due to my skill. No matter who rode him, he would have surely claimed the Triple Crown. I even think that if it hadn't been for my riding, he might not have suffered those 3 losses in his career. While it's not a lot, it does get the point across. Okabe felt that he failed Rudolph at the Japan Cup, that he could have won it easily. This book has become the subject of many memes due to just, well, how it's written, but it also gives us a look of how Yukio Okabe thinks of Rudolf during their time together. So yeah, Okabe was and still is Rudolf's biggest fan, and he was a really sore loser when it came to Katsuragi Ace. So with that out of the way, let's get to the next race of Rudolf's classic season, the Arima Kinen. Coming off his first loss, Rudolf would then compete against Mr. CB and Katsuragi Ace in the Arima Kinen. The Arima Kinen is one of the 3 most prestigious races of the JRA alongside the Japanese Derby and the Japan Cup. It's the last race of the year and it's ran at approximately 2,500 meters in length. It takes place at the Nakayama Racecourse at Funabashi, Chiba, and horses of 3 years and above can participate in on the last Sunday of December. The most notable thing about the Arima Kinen is that it is just like the Takarazuka Kinen, where participants are primarily chosen through a fan poll. Originally, Rudolf was not supposed to join the Arima Kinen, but because of the fact that Katsuragi Ace was racing here, the team decided that this was their only chance to get revenge on the horse. Because of the fact that Katsuragi Ace was on his 3rd year, this was technically the time where most racehorses would end up retiring. If Team Rudolf wanted to have revenge on Katsuragi Ace, they needed to defeat him now in his retirement race, because this will be their only chance. While Rudolf was only 2nd place in the fan vote to Mr. CB, he was the favorite to win. Before the race, it was said that Okabe devoted himself to learning more about Katsuragi Ace after the upset at the Japan Cup, with the vows of defeating him once and for all. And he and Rudolf will do it here, on the final race. The last race, where all 3 of these legends would compete against each other for one final time. So, they listened to the fanfare, got into their starting gates, and the Arima Kinen begins. As the race begins, Ace attempts to replicate his results from the Japan Cup, running far out in the front, while Rudolf was able to secure himself a place in 2nd, which he would maintain throughout most of the race. Mr. CB would enact his usual and closer positioning, and waits in the back. They hold their position until around the 3rd corner, where Mr. CB finally makes his move, and as he pushes from the back, Ace maintains his lead, while Rudolf continues to put pressure in 2nd. And when they finally pass by the 3rd corner, Rudolf finally makes his move, slowly catching up to Ace while said horse is desperate to keep his lead. By the 4th corner, Rudolf takes the lead, surging ahead in the final stretch as Ace struggles to keep up, who at this point was digging into the rail as he tries to catch up to Rudolf. Mr. CB then suddenly breaks in from the middle of the pack, reaching 3rd place as he tries to catch up to his rivals. And as Ace tries desperately to catch up to Rudolf, the Emperor does not let up one bit. He blazes down the track before he finally passes the finish line with a 2-length lead, with 2 minutes and 32 seconds. Katsuragi Ace and Mr. CB would soon finish after with a 1-2-3 placement for the rivals. Yukio Okabe and Symboli Rudolf have gotten their revenge on Katsuragi Ace. Symboli Rudolf would become the first ever JRA horse in history to earn 4 crowns in his 4-year-old season. At the award ceremony, Okabe, finally glad he avenged Rudolf's defeat at the Japan Cup, held up 4 fingers. With a record that year of 6 wins and 1 3rd place, Rudolf was chosen as the JRA's Horse of the Year. As for the other 2, Mr. CB would race in 2 more races before retiring. And for Katsuragi Ace, this would be his last race before his retirement. Katsuragi Ace would then become a breeding stallion after his retirement. Unfortunately, he did not have much success as his time as a breeding stud. Ace would then sadly develop a chronic heart condition, and after repeated heart attacks, he would pass away on July 3rd, 2000. An epitaph would be placed on his grave, which would read, "I remembered your performance at the Japan Cup. I was moved by what you did in that Japan Cup. I wish to see you race against Mr. CB one more time." Despite his passing, Katsuragi Ace would still be remembered as a great horse who proved that even losers could stand shoulder to shoulder with the greatest in history. And, well, besides, in his next life, he's having the time of his life.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
But let's get back to Rudolf. His 4th year is rolling around, and there were other plans that Rudolf and his team wanted to do. But before we get to that, there was a certain incident that was said to have happened to Rudolf between his 1st and 2nd race of the next season. This incident is what I would like to call the serious incident. There's a story about an event that happened during Rudolf's time at the Symboli Ranch. This event took place on April 15, 1985. At the time, Symboli Bokjo only had two separate stables. It was said that Rudolf was really picky with whom he befriended, known for only hanging out with a horse known as Symboli Reeve. In fact, it was said that he treated Reeve as if he was his own child. But even with Reeve being his closest connection in the ranch, it was said that Rudolf did not once show any form of expression. But the one thing that was apparent was that Rudolf was strong, far too strong for his fellow Symboli horses, because not a single one of them could keep up with him. When he would do parallel runs with his fellow horses, they would have them train with 2 to 3 of them at the same time. These training partners were given a one-length lead, with the purpose of the drill being that Rudolf had to overtake them. But even with that lead, Rudolf would absolutely demolish them. In fact, it seemed that Symboli Reeve was absolutely terrified of Rudolf. Whether it was due to his dominance or some other factor was not really said. This parallel run that Reeve took part in was a 1,750 dirt course. Rudolf's dominance of his training partners was so great that rumors began to spread. Rudolf would crush his training partners at the ranch in droves. In an article published before the Spring Tenno Show by Sankei Shobo, History's Strongest Horse Symboli Rudolf, which was written by Odora Shun, it would describe Rudolf's rise as a Triple Crown horse. Said article included a story where Rudolf's parallel run partner suffered a fracture with a poor prognosis, with most of the blame being shifted on Rudolf's dominance. Whether that is true or not is left unsaid, but many of these stories were often exaggerated tall tales that gossipers love to talk about. But when I said Rudolf was the only strong horse in the ranch, I wasn't exactly being truthful, because there was another horse at the stable that he and Reeve stayed at. This horse was Symboli Rudolf's nephew, Sirius Symboli. Like I said, Rudolf was picky with who he hung out with. So what did he think of Sirius? They did not get along. Because whenever the two of them got close to one another, many people would describe how it was possible to quite literally see their fighting spirit leaking out from them. They would both constantly try to restrain each other whenever they were within each other's vicinity. And on this particular parallel run, on April 15, 1985, while in front of a crowd of reporters, these two ran a parallel for a mile. The results? Sirius defeated Rudolf. The entire reason this parallel run happened was to show that Sirius, despite not participating in the Satsuki show, was still a healthy and strong horse. The on-site vet, Kirisawa Masayoshi, would share they ran a parallel with Okabe on Sirius and Yuchan on Rudolf, but no other horse could start Rudolf off one-on-one like Sirius did. So why did Rudolf act this way towards Sirius? Like many things, no one can really tell you. They are horses after all. But there was a guess that was made. A guess that many could agree upon. Rudolf and Sirius saw each other as equals. This event would happen after Rudolf's first win of 1985, where he won the Nikkei show by a 4-length lead. In said race, Rudolf had to front run the entire time due to there being no front runners or even pace chasers in the competition. But this incident wouldn't be a one-time thing, because there were many claims that this was a recurring incident. Out of the many parallel and mock races that they would do together, the results would end up being the same, with Sirius being the victor of most of the races that these two participated in. This event here showed that the Symboli Ranch not only had one champion, but a potential rising star in the future. It would seem that Symboli Rudolf wasn't the only horse to look out for at the Symboli Ranch. But even with his many interactions with Sirius Symboli at the Symboli Ranch, Rudolf still had his entire 5th year to look out for, because after the Sirius incident, Symboli Rudolf would go on to win another race, the Spring Tenno Show. His second race was the Spring Tenno Show, and this would be the third and final race against his fellow Triple Crown winner, Mr. CB. The Spring Tenno Show is part of a pair of 2 races dedicated to the Emperor of Japan. It's ran at a distance of 3,200 meters in length, making it the longest G1 race in Japan. It takes place at the Kyoto Racecourse at Fushimi-ku, Kyoto, and horses of 3 years and above can participate in around late April and early May. This race would be the last time these two Triple Crown champions would face each other. The last time that Rudolf would race against someone he could easily call his equal. For one final time together, they listened to the fanfare, got into their starting gates, and the Spring Tendo Show begins. Both Rudolf and Mr. CB got into their positions as usual, with Mr. CB in the back and Rudolf in front of him. It's at the approach of the third corner when the racers made their move. Mr. CB, just like in his victory at the 1983 Kikka Show, surges early just before the third corner, and that was the first time Rudolf had ever seen the horse ahead of him. Despite Okabe's attempt to urge him to speed up, Rudolf, just like in the Derby, didn't listen and stayed where he was, showing to Okabe that this time he was calling the shots. And his forethought came to fruition since on the final stretch, Mr. CB started to slow down, which then Rudolf easily took advantage of and passed him. Rudolf would win the Spring Tendo Show by a 2.5 length lead over Sakura Gaisen, his half-brother. Mr. CB sadly placed 5th, and he would then retire from racing to become a breeding stud. At the award ceremony, Okabe held up 5 fingers. Rudolf was the first horse to have won 5 G1 races since Shinzan. But for Team Rudolf, that wasn't enough. They wanted more. They were determined to make Rudolf the very best in history. And what better way to do that than to pick up an old dream that was gathering dust in the attic. So, Wada revived that old plan to run internationally, and he scheduled Rudolf to go abroad to the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Stakes once again, this time alongside Sirius Symboli, the winner of that year's Tokyo Yushu. But before the overseas trip, Rudolf would enter the Takarazuka Kinen. The Takarazuka Kinen is a G1 race that is held at the Hanshin Racecourse in Takarazuka, Hyogo. It's run at a distance of 2,000 meters in length and takes place in late June, where 3-year-old racers and above can participate. And much like the Arima Kinen, only a select few can join through amazing results, with most of the participants being only able to enter through a fat hole. And of course, as a well-known competitor, Rudolf would obviously have a place in this race. Except Rudolf never ran at the Takarazuka Kinen. On the Saturday before the race, Rudolf would receive a scratch due to a left shoulder limp. This shoulder limp was caused by Rudolf nearly crashing into the dirt during some training at the Hanshin Racecourse, where he stumbled on a section of the turf that had been poorly managed, exposing the dirt underneath it. Wada became furious over this incident, declaring, "I'll never let him run again at a place that can't even manage its course properly," which would then be widely reported in the news. But that wasn't the only reason, because before withdrawing, trainer Nohira already had a feeling that Rudolf didn't have that accident purely because of the track condition. He had already noticed earlier that Rudolf seemed unwell, but Kirisawa Masayoshi insisted that Rudolf could still run despite Nohira's concerns. This would then lead to an argument, ending with Wada compromising that Rudolf would be withdrawn from the race. Unfortunately, due to this event and the injuries Rudolf received during the training accident, Rudolf would be left in Japan, while Sirius was sent ahead to challenge the world alone. Because of this, Wada even threw in the idea of retirement. Rumors started to circulate about this idea, and Rudolf himself did not look too good. He is on par with the legendary Shinzan, who also had 5 G1 races. So it's no surprise that rumors of his retirement started to pop up everywhere. And these rumors would turn out to be true, because on July 10, 1985, Wada announced to the public, due to his insufficient physical condition, the European tour is cancelled and Rudolf will subsequently retire. Okabe, who had gone to Europe ahead of time to prepare for Rudolf's planned trip, heard the news that day after the announcement and was deeply disheartened. Despite issuing another retirement declaration, Wada would continue Rudolf's treatment, still hoping that the horse could make a comeback. Okabe would later confide publicly, "I can't say with absolute certainty that there wasn't a shred of ambition to make Rudolf surpass Shinzan by winning a 6th crown," stating how hopeful he was that Rudolf would recover. Then, one summer day at the ranch, after a last-ditch bamboo needle acupuncture treatment was performed, and with the desperate prayers offered by the team, Rudolf started to finally recover. And as he started to get better, Wada retracted his announcement of Rudolf's retirement. And strangely enough, after this entire ordeal, Rudolf never raced at the Hanshin Racecourse. I wonder why. But, like most things, life goes on. And after Rudolf's miraculous recovery, they decided to tackle the next race on their list: the Fall Tenno Show. The Fall Tenno Show is the second and last race of the Tenno Show pair. It is also the first crown of the Autumn Triple Crown. It's ran at a distance of 2,000 meters in length, and it takes place at the Tokyo Racecourse at Fuji, Tokyo. Horses of 3 years and above can participate around late October. Since this was the first crown of the senior Autumn Triple Crown, Rudolf, if he were to win this race and the other 2 crowns after, would become the first ever 2-time Triple Crown winner, both for the Classics and Autumn Triple Crowns. The problem is, can Rudolf do that in his current condition? Despite being the favorite, Rudolf was in an unfavorable situation. Due to him not doing any prep races, he was placed in gate 17. And if you remember the gate issue, it becomes a huge disadvantage. Not only that, but he was also still recovering from the Takarazuka incident. Rudolf was currently not at his peak, and he was going to have a hard time. And a hard time he had. He started late, and despite having a hard time catching up, he was still able to surge into a good position by the final corner. He would then enter the final straight, with the excited spectators wondering if Rudolf was finally running wild. He was then able to surge ahead towards the lead, displaying an astonishing performance of strength that made the crowd cheer in elation as he hailed challengers like Wince or Not on the home stretch. Unfortunately, just before the finish line, Rudolf would lose to Gallup Dyna by a half-length lead, who charged from the outside as the 13th favorite. Rudolf would place second. Most challengers would be happy, but Rudolf was a gold winner, not a silver keeper. It was said that in his stable back home in the Symboli farm, people reported that cries could be heard from Rudolf's stall, his frustration of losing another crown resonating throughout the entire ranch. But despite the very close finish, the team did not lose hope. On the contrary, they were confident that Rudolf could make a comeback. It was reported that trainer Nohira would state, "They say there are no absolutes in horse racing, but Rudolf is the exception. He is an absolute." Now, where have I heard this line before?
その恐ろしいまでの強さからトゥインクルシリーズに絶対はないが彼女には絶対があるとまで言われた。
Furthermore, Wada would comment, "These things happen. If you hate losing, you shouldn't race him." The Japanese staff mentioned his appetite was a bit off. But this time, for the Japan Cup, we can take it easy. He would confidently state this on a telegram from Chantilly where he was staying at. And the team's fate would end up coming true, because in the next two races, Rudolf would prove his worth once again. The next race of the season was the Japan Cup, the very same race he lost to Katsuragi Ace just a year ago. This time around, Rudolf had eyes from all around the world looking at him, with many of them being jockeys who were present at the race. As a 4-year-old, Rudolf's withers had receded towards his back, and his neck had grown noticeably longer. His physique was described as resembling that of a horse leaping out of an old European painting of a famous racehorse. Many international figures had things to say about him, and during the Japan Cup, Rudolf's physique became a major talking point among foreign racing officials. Lester Piggott, one of Britain's most renowned jockeys, was even stated to have pleaded with Wada, stating, "There aren't many horses like this even in Britain. When he races in Europe, I really want to ride him." The trainer of the Canadian challenger bounding away, trainer McDonald Benson, also offered the highest of praises, declaring, "I've never seen such a magnificent horse. There's nothing like him in Canada." The Daling Racing Forum even went as far as to place him on the same level as John Henry and Sagais. This article would even highlight Rudolf as a potential leading contender for the Budweiser Million on August 25th. Upon seeing this, Nohira reportedly stated with confidence, "It's only natural. Foreign racing officials saw Rudolf in the Japan Cup." But it's not just Rudolf who's here to make their mark on history. There are other competitors who are determined to bring down the Emperor. From Japan, we have Rocky Tiger, a regional dirt runner who's taking their chances at challenging the best of the best in all of Japan and in the world. Gallup Dyna, the winner of the 1985 Fall Tenno Show, the one who stole Rudolf's first crown in 1985, and once again being a potential crown stealer. Sakura Sunny O, who won the Copa Republica Argentina, Keisei High, and placed third in the Satsuki Show, the Kikka Show, and Asahi High Sansai Stakes of 1985. Yamano Shiragiku, the 2 times winner of the Kyoto Daishoten in 1983 and 1985. He would place third in that very same race in 1984. He also won the Kokura Daishoten in 1984. He would place second in the Hanshin Sansai Stakes in 1981, third in the Takamatsu no Miya High, and fifth in the Mile Championship. Then there is Wince or Not, who won the Hakodate Kinen twice, and the one who placed third right behind Rudolf in the 1985 Fall Tenno Show. He would also place third in the race that Rudolf wasn't able to run in, the Takarazuka Kinen, and he placed second in the Mainichi Okan and third in the Takamatsu no Miya High. And once again, just like Gallup Dyna, he is a returning rival. And it's not just the Japanese racers that he has to look out for. After all, this is the Japan Cup. There are racers from around the world who are waiting to make their mark in Japan. From the USA, Nemang, St. Hilarion, Golden Ivory, Aladar's Best, and Nastipor. There's also Dawn from Germany, Balitou from France, and Spirit of Kingston from Australia. But out of all the international racers, the one that Rudolf really had to keep his eye on was the Filbert, a New Zealand horse who won the New Zealand Stakes. And out of all of the races that he has participated prior to the Japan Cup, he would place in most of them. These are the challengers who are eager to take down the Emperor of Racing. With all of these expectations and attention on him, this time he would make sure, as the favorite, he would win the race. And he did just that. On November 24th, 1985, when the weather was poor and the track heavy, Rudolf won the Japan Cup, becoming the first racer to win the Japan Cup as the favorite, beating Rocky Tiger. This would be the first ever 1-2 finish for the Japan Cup. Even after all his ups and downs, the many cancelled international campaigns, the Takarazuka Kinen, and the Fall Tennosho, Rudolf was still able to prove why he was the emperor. At the ceremony, 7 months after the Spring Tennosho, Okabe raised his 6th finger, holding up his index as if to say Rudolf was back to being number 1. Rudolf would become the second Japanese horse to win the Japan Cup, a year after Katsuragi Ace. 6 crowns were in the emperor's possession, and it wouldn't stop there. There is one final race to conquer before the year's end, the Arima Kinen. It's been a long 3 years, with many highs and just as many lows. Although it wasn't a perfect run, Rudolf wouldn't have it any other way. He's accomplished so much and faced off against great rivals, and with his ever-present partner Okabe by his side, he will make sure that the last race of the year would be one to remember. Before the race, trainer Nohira instructed Okabe to win decisively, to make them feel the Emperor's divine might. And just like in the Japan Cup, there are challengers who are aiming to claim this race as their own. And with some of these challengers, Rudolf needed to look out for. Miho Shinzan, this year's 2-crown winner, winning the Satsuki Sho and Kikka Sho. He would also win the Kyoto Shimbunhai and the Fuji TV Show Spring Stakes. But the one thing Rudolf really needed to look out for was his pedigree. Because, as many of you have probably noticed, he shares a certain name with a certain champion. That's right, Miho Shinzan is the son of Shinzan, Japan's second Triple Crown champion. And again, if you were to look at his accomplishments, it seems that the apple hasn't really fallen far from the tree. So Rudolf had to be especially wary of Miho Shinzan. Nishino Raiden, winner of the Naruo Kinen and Hanshin Daishoten, he would also place 4th in this year's Spring Tennosho. And in the previous year, he would place 5th in the Japanese Derby and 3rd in the Kikka Sho. Tsuda Hawk, who was the runner-up of this year's Japanese Derby and Kikka Sho, he would also win the Hochihai Yayoi Sho. And finally, the returning rival, Gallop Dyna, the one who would steal the Fall Tennosho from Rudolf. He would also place 2nd in the February Handicap, 3rd in the KO High Spring Cup, and 5th in the Yasuda Kinen. These are the current rivals that Symboli Rudolf had to be wary of. So, for the final time of the year, 1985, Symboli Rudolf will do the very same song and dance he has done in every single race. The final race begins.
ルドルフにとりましては、あるいは日本で最後のレースになるかと思われます。さあ、綺麗なスタートを切りました。全部で10頭であります。ルドルフが、そしてミホシンザンが、この後 2500m どういった競馬を見せてくれるでしょうか。内の方から西野大伝がレースを引っ張る構えでいきましたが、外から金黒潮が行きました。金黒潮、西野大伝、そして須田ホークがつけております。須田ホークのインコースに西野大伝を抑えて4番手になりました。金黒潮が先頭で正面スタンド前に差し掛かってまいります。ルドルフはちょうど真ん中におります。10頭の真ん中に挟まれるようにして工程が進んでおります。そして一方のミホシンザンは視界の中にこのルドルフを捉えながら後方から2頭目でレースを進めております。さあ拍手が上がります。金黒潮、そして8番のギャロップタイガー、そして3番手スタホーク、外側にルドルフです。ルドルフ左の勝負が綺麗です。その後に山梨大肉がつけております。ミホシンザンはそのさらに2頭後であります。一番最後に1番のローラーキング、1コーナーを回りました。冬になりました。そして芝が枯れております。その茶色の芝の上をスーッと 角馬が出走していきますが、ギャロップライガーが逃げの速報に出ました。根本康弘、勝負師の根本が行きました。1馬身から2馬身、そして金黒潮が2番手ですが、この2番手から5艇のルドルフまでが10馬身以上の間が空きました。きっとついております名人の岡部幸雄、そしてこのルドルフを終始視界に捉えております美保新山、どっから勝負に行きますか。その一軍の中に須田ホークもおります。そしてピックの勝負服桜サニー王もおります。4歳の精鋭がじっと皇帝を任そうと待ち構えております。1頭遅れましたローラーキング、さあギャロップライナの逃げが深まりました。ルドルフが行きました。ルドルフの快進撃が始まりました。勝利で飾ることができるかシンボリルドルフ、緑のそして白い勝負服、小屋の中にぼやっと霞んでおりますが先頭に立った。このままゴールまで圧倒的な強さを見せて駆け抜けることができるか。後から襲いかかってくる馬は美保新山か須田ホークか。美保新山上がってきた、柴田正人が上がってきた。何か後ろにつけました。皇帝と若武者の対決になった。第4コーナー回った。ルドルフ出た、ルドルフ先頭だ。ギャロップが来てる、美保新山来た。さあ2強の対決が見られるか。直線です。新山、そしてルドルフ出た。世界のルドルフやはり強い。3馬身4馬身、日本の美保新山を離す。日本最後の競馬、最後のゴールイン、ルドルフは圧勝いたしました。
On the final straight, Okabe signals Rudolf to move forward. The Emperor surges ahead, barreling down the home stretch, blazing past the other contestants. Symboli Rudolf would win his second Arima Kinen by a decisive 4-length lead, defeating the 1985 winner of the Satsuki Sho and Kikka Sho, Miho Shinzan. Rudolf would become the second ever consecutive Arima Kinen winner, years after his grandfather, Speed Symboli, and he would become the first ever Japanese racehorse to win 7 G1 races. However, unlike his other victories, at the award ceremony, Okabe didn't raise his 7th finger, and no one can really tell you why. Maybe he was just overwhelmed by emotion and forgot, which is understandable with the achievement he and Rudolf just pulled off. They have just broken a record and have become the first ever 7 G1 race winners. So, what's next? After an amazing 2 seasons, what is left for Rudolf to do? Well, if he did this well here... No, it couldn't be. Of course it is. What do you expect? WADA wants him to run international. The next year rolled by, and Rudolf was going to set his sights on the rest of the world. Again. But, well, this time, not everyone was in accordance. WADA wanted Rudolf to go to the United States during spring, then Europe in fall. Nohida, on the other hand, wanted Rudolf to rest during the spring and head to Europe in fall. This, of course, led to a big argument, with said argument concluding in WADA's favor. But because of this, no one from Nohida's team accompanied him and Rudolf to the States. If they wanted to train, they had to depend on the local on-site staff. In response to this, WADA did not invite Nohida to the race. He had to travel not as a VIP, but as a normal spectator if he wanted to see Rudolf run. Let me just remind you, these are 2 full-grown men. Yeah. Rudolf would then be scheduled to run in the Santa Anita Park's San Luis Race Stakes. After that, he would go to the San Juan Capistrano Invitational Handicap. This was WADA's international plan. So, with this, Rudolf is about to start his international tour. Not Rudolf, in the San Luis Race Stakes, couldn't even place. He finished 6th, beaten by Dahar. The main reason that people attributed his defeat to was due to the development of a left front suspensory ligament injury while crossing the dirt course, a characteristic features of most American racetracks. On that very same day that Rudolf lost, NHK and other networks back in Japan reported Symboli Rudolf's injury and poor showing in the United States. If that wasn't bad enough, Okabe had sensed something amiss with Symboli Rudolf during training, just before the race, and advised the team to withdraw him. But his advice was not heeded. So yeah, that dumb fight WADA and Nohida had was for nothing. And may I add, strangely enough, all 3 of Symboli Rudolf's defeats occurred on left-handed racecourses. Weird coincidence, but hey, that's what happened. And personally, if I were to add my unprofessional opinion, this whole mess wouldn't have happened if WADA decided to follow Nohida's plan. If he took Nohira's plan, waited until the fall, and raced in Europe, where, while not as one-to-one to the Japanese ones, the races were mostly comprised of turf, maybe Rudolf would have had a different end to his career. But hey, that's just my opinion. What would I know? I'm still a newbie about horse racing. And I did mean that. This is the end of Rudolf's racing career. After returning to Japan, even though plans for another overseas trips were considered, ultimately, retirement was decided. A retirement ceremony was held at the Nakayama Racecourse on December 7th, 1985. Symboli Rudolf would appear at his retirement ceremony wearing a silk banner bearing the number 7 and a crown emblem. This silk design was designed specifically to symbolize his 7 major victories, and thus was the end of the Emperor's reign. After retiring from racing, Symboli Rudolf would enter stud life at the Symboli farm in Momitsu Town, Hokkaido. Out of his many crops, he would sire many great racers. Contesters such as Kyowa Hoseki, winner of the 4-year-old Philly Special and Tokyo Shimbunhai, Arten Symboli, winner of the Stayer Stakes and runner-up in the Takarazuka Kinen, and Jamseed, who was able to place second in a French graded stakes race, accomplishing what his father wasn't able to achieve. But, out of all of his children, there were only 2 who were truly capable of capturing the hearts of the people. The first, and most well-known, is Symboli Rudolf's winning child, the miraculous monarch Tokai Teo, the 2-crown winner and 4-time G1 conqueror in the 1990s. Thanks to Teo, Rudolf was able to achieve a unique achievement of sire and foal consecutively winning 2 of the Classics Triple Crowns in the span of 2 generations. His second most well-known child is Tsurumaru Tsuyoshi, the 6th and oftentimes forgotten member of Japan's golden generation of racehorses. Despite his potential, Tsuyoshi did not have a really successful career due to health problems he had to confront throughout his lifetime. Even so, he was able to win graded races such as the Asahi Challenge Cup and the Kyoto Daishoten. Tsuyoshi would be the last child of Symboli Rudolf's lineage who would make a name for himself in the JRA. Symboli Rudolf would earn many awards and honors throughout his life. Not only did he become the 4th Triple Crown champion, but he would earn the JRA award for Best 2-Year-Old Colt and the Japanese Horse of the Year in that very same year. He would then receive the JRA award for Best Older Male Horse of 1985. 2 years later, in 1987, he would be inducted into the JRA Hall of Fame. Symboli Rudolf would then pass away on October 4, 2011, at the age of 30. He would spend his final moments at the Symboli farm in Narita, Chiba. After his passing, the JRA held memorial races on October 8, with the Perseus Stakes and Opal Stakes being dubbed the Symboli Rudolf Memorial Races. Additionally, condolence books were placed at each racecourse and winds facilities, and memorial photos exhibitions were held at Tokyo Racecourse and Kyoto Racecourse. On that very same year, another legend maker would be crowned as a Triple Crown champion. 2 years later, his successor and winning child, Tokai Teo, would join him in the eternal pasture. Symboli Rudolf was an amazing racer, the one who set the standard on what it truly means to be a legend in the JRA, that future racers should strive to become like the Emperor. But one of the main criticisms that Symboli Rudolf would receive was that there weren't really any challengers that truly tested his mettle, that he could call an equal. Sure, Katsuragi Ace and Mr. CB were there to give him a well-needed challenge, but the only time he truly did lose to them was when he himself wasn't at 100%. There really wasn't someone he could call a rival and equal. But the thing is, he had an equal. That rival was just not in Japan during Rudolf's career. If he was here in Japan, or if Rudolf joined him on his quest, Symboli Rudolf would have had someone who could have really pushed his limits. Yes, the one who could have truly given him a challenge. The one who has defeated the Emperor one-on-one at his best wasn't here in Japan. He was on an international campaign, following in the footsteps of one of the first ever Japanese thoroughbreds to have ever raced outside of the land of the rising sun. The one who will become one of the many pioneers of overseas racing for Japan. He's known as the Northern Star who guided Japan in their first steps in international conquest. Sirius Symboli. Hi, hello. So, we're done with Rudolf, and well, I don't really have a lot to say about Rudolf besides he was a powerful horse, but the interesting thing about him was not his victories, but the in-betweens, right? So all of his lows, basically. So his failed expeditions overseas, the fact that he almost retired because of health issues, that's what was really interesting about him. So yeah. Other than that, Rudolf, strong horse. Really glad that he got adapted into the Rudolf and Umu Musume. Cool character, cool horse, that's all I gotta say. Second of all, the next video is going to be about Sirius. So Legend Maker 3 is going to be about Sirius, and he's actually the reason why I started this series. It's because there's not a lot about Sirius. If a lot of you have realized, when Sirius is involved in a conversation, it's mostly either Sirius was really strong or Sirius was a fraud. That's what we're going to be looking at in Legend Maker 3. How did Sirius fail his overseas expedition? Because that's why he's a fraud. Everyone knows that he failed his expedition. So we're going to look into how he failed it and how he could have been an actual contender overseas. But yeah, I'm going to leave that for Legend Maker 3. So look forward to that. And lastly, before I leave you guys off, go look at Lunatic Monster stuff. The whole series versus Rudolph stuff would have never been a section in this video if it weren't for their story, because these stories come from Japanese articles that are not accessible to people like me who live on the other side of the planet. So I wouldn't have been able to access those articles, so him making stories like these to reach a wider audience or people who do not have the tools to look for these stories, it's really cool. But yeah, please go check out Lunatic Monster stuff. They tell some pretty good stories. But other than that, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you saw, consider liking and subscribing. And again, if I make any mistakes or you want to leave anything that I left out about Rudolph in this entire video, don't be afraid to leave it in the comment section below. I really do hope that this video made your day a little bit better, and I'll see you around.